Okay, all right, this one, okay.
The Tangipahoa Parish Council meeting for December 9th will now come to order. We'll do the public hearing. The first item on the public hearing is Tangipahoa Parish Order number 1952. That's an ordinance to authorize the parish president to accept a donation and removal of property from Andrew M. Evans II and Catherine Evans Vigmaron, and to authorize the parish president or his authorized designee to sign any and all documents in regard to the acceptance of the aforementioned donation. Anybody wish to address that item? If not, the second item on the public hearing is Tangipahoa Parish Order number 19-44. That's an ordinance adopting the operating capital outlay budgets of the parish for fiscal year 2020. Anybody wish to address that item?
Ms. McNeely, yes. Okay. We're in the budget committee, and I was told that we need to. I need to add this to that. Budget committee met today, and we need to adopt the budget for discussion, including any substantial changes that took place at the budget committee meeting this afternoon at 4:30.
All right. Thank you.
Okay.
Anything else on that? If not, the next item is Tangipahoa Parish Order number 1953. That's an ordinance amending Tangipahoa Parish Order number 91-8 and Tangipahoa Parish Order number 96-3 regarding the Parish Code of Ordinances, Chapter 13, logging permits. Anybody want to check that out? If not, the next item is Tangipahoa Parish Order number 1954. An ordinance amending Tangipahoa Parish Order number 19-31. Adoption of an operating and capital outlay budget for the parish for 2019.
I'll add this language again. Budget committee met this afternoon, and we need to adopt this budget for discussion, including any submitted changes at the budget committee meeting this afternoon at 4:30.
All right, thank you. We'll move on to the next.
One question, if I could. Was there any changes from the last meeting to the budget?
19 budget, the only changes there were basically the keep us in compliance with auditors, the percentage stuff. There was nothing really big changes that took place. Correct, Mr. McNeely, yes. That's the only thing we had, okay?
No budgets, nobody's budget was changed?
No.
Okay.
Anything else? If not, we'll move on to the next item. Tangipahoa Parish Order number 1955. That's an ordinance amending Tangipahoa Parish subdivision regulation on various requirements and allowing those requirements to become development regulation for codification. Anybody wish to address that out? If not, we'll move on to the next one. Tangipahoa Parish Order number 1956. That's an ordinance adopting the Tangipahoa Parish Government Employee Handbook. Anybody wish to address that out? If not, next is Tangipahoa Parish Order number 1957. Adoption of the 2020 budget of the Tangipahoa Parish Convention and Visitors Bureau. Anybody wish to address that out? Not, moving on. Tangipahoa Parish Order number 1958. That's an ordinance adopting the 2020 operating budget for the Tangipahoa Parish Library Board of Control. Next is Tangipahoa Parish Order number 1959. That's an ordinance amending the 2019 budget of the Tangipahoa Parish Convention and Visitors Bureau. Next is Tangipahoa Parish Order number 1960, a variance to Tangipahoa Parish Order number 1156 to allow for the approval of two-family duplex on a platted lot of record that is adjacent to a lot of record under the same ownership, including partnership LLC for Lot 2 of Shalacy petition, Old Baton Rouge Highway. Anybody wish to address that out? If not, the last item on public hearing is Tangipahoa Parish Order number 1961. That's a variance for Tangipahoa Parish Order number 1108 at 14256 East Black Cat Road to allow for an automobile impound facility with no storage of vehicles to construct a 6-foot fence in line with state regulation and provide a site plan in lieu of a survey. Anybody want to address that out? If not, then we'll go to our regular meeting. The invocation be by Councilman Trent Forrest, and the pledge of allegiance be by Councilman David Vial.
Bow your heads. Dear Lord, we come to you tonight asking for your protection over us, asking you to give us the wisdom to make the right decisions for our parish. Thank you for grace. We thank you for giving us our health. Thank you for bringing our council members back. Dear Lord, just look over us, guide us, lead us in our daily lives. We ask you to be with our soldiers and help protect them, keep them out of harm's way so they can protect us. Thank you for living in such a great country. Forgive us when we fail thee. In your name we pray.
Amen. Would all veterans and active military please render the proper salute? I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next will be roll call, please.
Mr. Forrest?
Here.
Mr. Bailey?
Present.
Mr. Joseph? Mr. Bruno?
Here.
Mr. Ridgel?
Here.
Mr. Mayhew? Here. Mr. Wells?
Here.
Mr. Vial?
Here.
Mr. Levine? Mr. Cortez?
Here.
Thank you. Next, we'd like to ask if you have cell phones or any other electronic devices, we'd like to ask you to turn them off or mute them, please. The next item is adoption of our minutes for the regular meeting on November 25th.
So move.
Have a motion by Councilman Vial,
Second.
a second by Councilman Forrest. Roll call, please.
Mr. Forrest?
Yes.
Mr. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Joseph? Yes. Mr. Bruno?
Yes.
Mr. Ridgel?
Yes.
Mr. Mayhew?
Yes.
Mr. Wells?
Yes.
Mr. Vial?
Yes.
Mr. Cortez?
Yes.
All right, the motion is carried. Next is public input. Anybody wish to address any items that were not on our public hearing? If not, the next item is our parish president report.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
We have a few items. The first one is approval of change order number 4 for Club Deluxe Road overlay and widening. Basically, it's documentation of additions and adjustments to the quantities and materials for that project. There is no cost change in all this. It's just to document all that. And there was some time, because of these changes, it added some time for the project to be in compliance. So, like I said, again, it's mainly documentation.
Long time coming.
Motion by Councilman Mayhew,
I'll second.
second by Councilman Vial. Roll call, please.
Mr. Forrest? Yes. Mr. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Joseph?
Yes.
Mr. Bruno?
Yes.
Mr. Ridgel?
Yes.
Mr. Mayhew? Mr. Wells?
Yes.
Mr. Vial?
Yes.
Mr. Cortez?
Yes.
All right, the motion is carried.
Thank you. I don't know if any of y'all have driven down it today.
Oh, yeah.
But with the striping and everything, it's really, really nice.
Yes, it's nice.
Really good.
Only took a few years to get there.
Yeah, I think total is 13.
Try a decade.
12 for sure. Next item is approval of, to purchase 4 or more, but 4 5 to 6 yard dump trucks. The bid sheets are in your packet, but the low bid was St. Martin Parish Acquisitions LLC, doing business as Courtesy Ford out of Bro Bridge. It's 2021 F-750. Each truck is $75,478.
When you say on board, maybe 6, or you just kind of leaving it open for?
No, it's 4, but the bid goes out that way in case there was money available, but we're not going to be buying anymore. It's just, that's the way it was worded on the bid package.
Okay.
It's Acquisitions LLC.
Is Courtesy Ford out of Bro Bridge, Louisiana.
Yes,
They were the
okay.
low bidder.
Also move.
We have a motion by Councilman Vial,
Second.
second by Councilman Bailey. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Joseph?
Yes.
Mr. Bruno?
Yes.
Mr. Ridgel?
Yes.
Mr. Mayhew?
Yes.
Mr. Wells?
Yes.
Mr. Vial?
Yes.
Mr. Cortez?
Yes.
Mr. Forrest?
Yes.
All right, that motion is carried.
Thank you. The next one is approval to buy 2 or more 12 to 16 yard dump trucks. The low bid was Empire Sales LLC out of Slidell, Louisiana. It's a Freightliner 2021 114 SD for $106,875.98. And they were the low bidder.
We have a motion by Councilman Ridgel,
I'll second.
second by Councilman Mayhew. Roll call, please.
Mr. Joseph?
Yes.
Mr. Bruno? Yes. Mr. Ristall?
Yes.
Mr. Mayu?
Yes.
Mr. Wells?
Yes.
Mr. Vial?
Yes.
Mr. Cortez?
Yes.
Mr. Forrest? Mr. Bailey?
Yes.
All right, motion is carried.
Thank you. The fourth item is approval of the government fiscal agent for the next 4 years. First Guaranty Bank was the best, they're currently our fiscal agent, and they were the best proposal that came in. There were two, First Guaranty Bank and First Bank. First Guaranty's was a better, and that is in your packet too.
Also move.
We have a motion by Councilman Vial.
Second.
Second by Councilman Joseph. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bruno?
Yes.
Mr. Ridgell?
Yes.
Mr. Mayu?
Yes.
Mr. Wells?
Yes.
Mr. Vial?
Yes.
Mr. Cortez?
Yes.
Mr. Forrest?
Yes.
Mr. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Joseph?
Yes.
And then lastly.
Motion carried.
Lastly, your financial reports are on your desk and have been emailed to you. As always, if you have any specific questions, please contact us, and we'll be glad to get you the information. Any questions, comments?
No, sir.
Thank y'all very much.
Thank you.
We have several requests to move up item number 17. Item number 17 is introduction of Tangipahoa Parish Order 1962. That's an ordinance approving the contract with Acadian Ambulance Service Incorporated and authorizing the parish president to sign any and all documents in regards thereof.
This is just an introduction.
Yes,
Is there a committee that works on this?
yes.
Could someone from the committee just explain why we went to an 8-year contract? So,
Mr. Chairman? Well, it's a 4-year contract. It mentions that it's 8, but it's a 4-year contract for 2 times. Which is, yeah, that's what it is, 4 years.
maybe I'll reword it. Are we gonna have to vote again in 4 years or 8 years?
Yeah.
4.
Four.
4.
Well, I'll also move.
All right, I have a motion by Councilman Ridgell,
A second?
a second by Councilman Joseph. Roll call, please.
Mr. Forrest?
Yes.
Mr. Bailey?
No.
Mr. Joseph?
Yes.
Mr. Bruno?
Yes.
Mr. Ridgell?
Yes.
Mr. Mayu?
Yes.
Mr. Wells?
Yes.
Mr. Vial?
Yes.
Mr. Cortez?
Yes.
All right, the motion is carried. Next is item number 6, adoption of Tangipahoa Parish Order number 1952. That's an order to authorize the parish president to accept a donation of movable property from Andrew Everts II and Captain Edgar Vicaron, and to authorize the parish president to authorize a designee to sign any or all documents regarding to the acceptance of the aforementioned donation.
This was introduced at the last meeting. Also move.
All right, a motion by Councilman Vial,
Second.
second by Councilman Mayhew. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bruno?
Yes.
Mr. Ridgell?
Yes.
Mr. Mayu?
Yes.
Mr. Wells?
Yes.
Mr. Vial?
Yes.
Mr. Cortez? Mr. Forrest? Mr. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Joseph?
Yes.
That motion is carried. Next is item number 7, introduction of Tangipahoa Parish Order number 1944. That's an ordinance adopting operating and capital outlay budgets of the parish for fiscal year 2020. Motion by Councilman Joseph,
Second here.
second by Councilman Vial. Roll call, please.
Mr. Ridgell?
Yes.
Mr. Mayu?
Yes.
Mr. Wells?
Yes.
Mr. Vial?
Yes.
Mr. Cortez?
Yes.
Mr. Forrest?
Yes.
Mr. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Joseph?
Yes.
Mr. Bruno?
Yes.
The motion is carried. Next is item number 8, adoption of Tangipahoa Parish Order number 1953. That's an ordinance amending Tangipahoa Parish Order number 91-8 and Tangipahoa Parish Order number 96-3 regarding Tangipahoa Parish Codes of Ordinances, Chapter 3, logging permits.
So moved. So moved. Chapter
13, I said something. I apologize for that. 13, logging permits. I have a motion by Councilman Bruno. Thank you, Mr. Joseph.
Second.
And second by Councilman Joseph. Roll call, please.
Mr. Mayu? Mr. Wells?
Yes.
Mr. Vial?
Yes.
Mr. Cortez?
Yes.
Mr. Forrest?
Yes.
Mr. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Joseph?
Yes.
Mr. Bruno?
Yes.
Mr. Ridgell?
Yes.
All right, the motion is carried. Next is item number 9, adoption of Tangipahoa Ordinance number 1954. That's an ordinance amending Tangipahoa Parish Order number 1931. adoption of the operating and capital outlay budgets of Tangipahoa Parish Council government for 2019.
I just got a question on that one.
Okay?
I got a list of my roads in here, and I'm sure that's with the capital outlay, but the list is not right on here. I signed the right one today, but this list is not the right one that's in here. Okay? And y'all may want to check it just to,
Mine too. Mine's different from what I signed the other night. I'll get with you after.
yeah.
That he got this.
Okay.
All right, do I have a motion?
So moved.
I have a motion by Councilman Joseph. Second by Councilman Forrest. Roll call, please.
Mr. Vial?
Yes.
Mr. Cortez? Yes. Mr. Forrest?
Yes.
Mr. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Joseph?
Yes.
Mr. Bruno?
Yes.
Mr. Ridgel?
Yes.
Mr. Mayu?
Yes.
Mr. Wells?
Yes. All right, motion is carried. Next is item number 10. Adoption of Tangipahoa Parish Order number 1955. That's an ordinance amending Tangipahoa Parish subdivision regulation and various requirements and allowing those requirements to become development regulation for codification.
So moved.
Motion by Councilman Bruno.
Second.
Second by Councilman Vial.
Yes,
Roll
sir.
call, please.
Mr. Cortez? Yes. Mr. Forrest? Yes. Mr. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Joseph?
Yes.
Mr. Bruno? Mr. Ridgel?
Yes.
Mr. Mayu?
Yes.
Mr. Wells?
Yes.
Mr. Vial?
Yes.
All right, motion is carried. Next is item number 11. Adoption of Tangipahoa Parish Order number 1956. An ordinance and adopting Tangipahoa Parish Government Employee Handbook.
So moved.
Have a motion by Councilman Joseph.
Second.
Second by Councilman Cortez. Roll call, please.
Mr. Forrest?
Yes.
Mr. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Joseph?
Yes.
Mr. Bruno?
Yes.
Mr. Ridgel? Mr. Mayu?
Yes.
Mr. Wells?
Yes.
Mr. Cortez?
Yes.
All right, the motion is carried. Next is item number 12. Adoption of Tangipahoa Parish Order number 1957. Adoption of the 2020 budget of Tangipahoa Parish Convention and Visitors Bureau.
So moved.
Motion by Councilman Bailey.
Second.
Second by Councilman Mayhew. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Joseph?
Yes.
Mr. Bruno?
Yes.
Mr. Ridgel? Mr. Mayu?
Yes.
Mr. Wells?
Yes.
Mr. Cortez?
Yes.
Mr. Forrest?
All right, motion is carried. Next is item number 13. Adoption of Tangipahoa Parish Order number 1958. That's the ordinance adopting the 2020 operating budget for Tangipahoa Parish Library Board of Control.
So moved.
Questions, Chairman? As you all know, I represent the council on the library board. I've been there since I've been on the council. So if anyone else would like to serve, then let me know, but I don't mind serving.
Okay.
And we thank you for that.
Thank you for your service.
You're welcome.
We had a motion by Councilman Forrest
Second.
and a second by Councilman Joseph. Roll call, please.
Mr. Joseph?
Yes.
Mr. Bruno?
Yes.
Mr. Ridgel? Mr. Mayu?
Yes.
Mr. Wells?
Yes.
Mr. Cortez?
Yes.
Mr. Forrest?
Yes.
Mr. Bailey?
Yes.
The motion is carried. Next is item number 14. Adoption of Tangipahoa Parish Order number 1959. That's an ordinance amending the 2019 budget of the Tangipahoa Parish Convention and Visitors Bureau.
So moved.
Motion by Councilman Bailey, second by Councilman Bruno. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bruno?
Yes.
Mr. Ridgel?
Yes.
Mr. Mayu?
Yes.
Mr. Wells?
Yes.
Mr. Cortez?
Yes.
Mr. Forrest?
Yes.
Mr. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Joseph?
Yes.
All right, motion is carried. Next is item number 15. Adoption of Tangipahoa Parish Order number 1960. A variance to Tangipahoa Parish Order number 1156 to allow for the approval of a two-family duplex on a platted lot of record that is adjacent to a lot recorded under the same ownership, including partnership LLC for Lot 2 of the Shalacy petition. That's Old Banwich Highway.
So moved.
All right, motion by Councilman Mayhew.
Second.
Second by Councilman Ridgel. Roll call, please.
Mr. Ridgel? Yes. Mr. Mayu?
Yes.
Mr. Wells?
Yes.
Mr. Cortez?
Yes.
Mr. Forrest?
Yes.
Mr. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Joseph?
Yes.
Mr. Bruno?
Yes.
All right, that motion is carried. Next is item number 16. Adoption of Tangipahoa Parish Ordinance number 1961. A variance to Tangipahoa Parish Order number 1108 at 14256 East Black Cat Road to allow for an automobile impound facility with no storage of vehicles and to construct a 6-foot fence in line with state regulations and provide a site plan in lieu of a survey.
So moved.
Motion by Councilman Bruno,
Second.
second by Councilman Mayhew. Roll call, please.
Mr. Mayhew?
Yes.
Mr. Wells?
Yes.
Mr. Cortez?
Yes.
Mr. Forrest? Mr. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Joseph?
Yes.
Mr. Bruno?
Yes.
Mr. Ridgel?
Yes.
The motion is carried. Next is item number 18. Appoint to reappoint to the Hospital Service District Board.
Mr. Chairman, that's a joint appointment between Mr. Forrest, Mr. Bailey, and myself. You guys don't have any problem. Recommend approval.
Okay. We have a motion by Councilman Joseph. Second by Councilman Forrest. Roll call, please.
Mr. Cortez?
Yes.
Mr. Forrest? Mr. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Joseph?
Yes.
Mr. Bruno?
Yes.
Mr. Ridgel? Mr. Mayhew?
Yes.
Mr. Wells?
Yes. Our motion is carried. Next is item number 19. Appoint to reappoint to the Gravity Drainage District number 4.
That's me again, Mr. Chairman. I am reappointing Mr. Mark Miller back to the drainage.
Second.
We have a second by Councilman Bruno. The motion was made by Councilman Joseph. Roll call, please.
Mr. Forrest?
Yes.
Mr. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Joseph?
Yes.
Mr. Bruno?
Yes.
Mr. Ridgel?
Yes.
Mr. Mayhew?
Yes.
Mr. Wells?
Yes.
Mr. Cortez?
Yes.
All right, that motion is carried. Next item is beer, wine, and liquor permits. We have 3. Energy Express, 43234 Pumpkin Center Road in Hammond. Sunny Times, 27466 Highway 22. And Best Stop number 46, Ponchatoula. Those are 3 that we have.
I'll make the motion on
All right, a motion by Councilman Mayhew,
Second.
second by Councilman Ridgel. Roll call, please.
Mr. Forrest?
Yes.
Mr. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Joseph?
Yes.
Mr. Bruno?
Yes.
Mr. Ridgel?
Yes.
Mr. Mayhew?
Yes.
Mr. Wells?
Yes.
Mr. Cortez?
Yes.
All right, that motion is carried.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I have one I'd like to add by unanimous.
You got what is it?
I'll catch you now.
Huh?
Mr. Randy Trico has resigned from the sewer district. David had to leave. David has a reappointment, or appointment, to fill his unexpired term. I have paperwork here. Y'all should have a copy of it. I'd like to add that unanimous.
Okay.
Second.
All right, we have a motion by Councilman Cortez, a second by Councilman Bruno to add that to the agenda. Roll call, please.
Mr. Forrest?
Yes.
Mr. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Joseph?
Yes.
Mr. Bruno?
Yes.
Mr. Ridgel?
Yes.
Mr. Mayhew?
Yes.
Mr. Wells?
Yes.
Mr. Cortez?
Yes.
All right, been added?
Yes, sir, please. Mr. Trico has resigned from the board, and Mr. David is appointing Samuel Richmond to fill the unexpired term, and I'll make a motion for David for that.
Second.
I have a motion by Councilman Cortez, a second by Councilman Bailey. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Joseph?
Yes.
Mr. Bruno?
Yes.
Mr. Ridgel?
Yes.
Mr. Mayhew?
Yes.
Mr. Wells?
Yes.
Mr. Cortez?
Yes.
Mr. Forrest?
Yes.
All right, that motion is carried. Next is legal matters.
No, we do have something.
Yeah,
Yeah, we need to go into executive.
we have something. We need to go in executive. I thought they told you.
I'm not aware of it.
I so move if we.
Before we do that, so when we come out of executive session, councilman privileges, anybody have any?
Yes, thank you.
All right, Councilman Forrest and then Councilman Joe.
I just request, someone from the committee that dealt with the Acadian, contract, just talk to me after. Because in Article 2, it says, stated here in 2 4-year terms beginning January 2020, ending December 2027.
So, yeah, that could be cleared up, huh, Mr. Joseph?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's just
Okay.
Okay. Anything else, Trent?
no.
Okay, Mr. Joseph.
Thank you for allowing me to speak right now. This Thursday, the Vietnam Veterans of America are sponsoring a Wreath Across America ceremony. We do it every year, and the purpose is to honor those veterans who have gone on to glory. We're having the ceremony at the AB Walmart at 11 a.m.
Why are you
this
making a point?
Thursday.
Why are you making a point?
And we're inviting all veterans, the family of veterans, general public, and the families of veterans, and of course, general public and elected officials. We'd like for y'all to come out and support us. It's a very, very
That's all I.
passionate, touching
That's not-
ceremony. It lasts about 45 minutes. Bringing in Reed coming from Virginia. We're gonna convoy from
I don't know.
Virginia
Why did I get this?
all the way down to Mississippi and get released. Chair the public, pick up the convoy, Jackson, and we'll bring them on in. 11 o'clock this Thursday. Thank you.
Can I just say involved in a lawsuit?
And look, I just want to say, Mr. Joseph made several tours in Vietnam through his illustrious career and never was wounded until he messed with his wife. And now he's on injured reserve because of messing with Miss Rose. So, but he made it through Vietnam and his career in the Army unscathed. But he found out that that little woman was a lot tougher than those.
Mr. Bailey?
First, I want to congratulate the Southeastern Lions for an outstanding football season. I'm sorry they didn't get to go further, but they did win their first round game against a much higher rated opponent. And I've got to congratulate my LSU Tigers for being the #1 seed and representing Louisiana well.
Go Tigers. Good job.
Mr. Joseph?
I'm good.
We don't have nothing to say, right?
Nah.
Not after that one.
Yesterday.
Councilman Mayhew?
Let's wait till the playoffs.
I want to thank Gun Anderson and his litter crew for doing a wonderful job of picking up this litter all year round. They're constantly working all day, pretty much 8 hours a day, I think. At least in my district, I know they are. But I just want to thank them for all the hard work they're doing and continuing to do a good job.
Yeah.
And secondly, I want to thank Christian, and I think Rhonda helped her out with the party the other night. The food was great, the atmosphere was great. It turned out really nice. It was very nice over there in Camp Shemakity. I just want to thank her again.
It was. Anyone else? If not, we need to go into executive session for a matter with dealing with Tangipahoa Parish Sheriff Office litigation. I entertain a motion. Motion by Councilman Joseph, second by Councilman Cortez. Roll call, please.
Mr. Forrest? Yes. Mr. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Joseph?
Yes.
Mr. Bruno?
Yeah.
Mr. Ridgel? Mr. Mayhew?
Yep.
Mr. Wells?
Yes.
Mr. Cortez?
17, proudly serving the Florida parishes.
No action was taken.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion.
Yes, sir.
The motion is to follow the directions of our attorney and stick to the course that we have already set out and not change.
I have a motion by Councilman Bruno. Second by Councilman Cortez. Roll call, please.
Mr. Forrest? Yes. Mr. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Joseph?
Yes.
Mr. Bruno?
Yes.
Mr. Ridgel?
Yes.
Mr. Mayhew?
Yes.
Mr. Wells?
Yes.
Mr. Cortez?
All right, motion is carried.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion.
Oh, go ahead.
I'll make a motion, we adjourn.
All right, do I have a second? I have a motion by Councilman Cortez.
Second.
All right, anybody object? Motion is carried. This meeting is adjourned.